books and articles and magazines and theater programs and so on. They were really intellectual kindred spirits, I think you could say. And Bates, as the elder artist, had really had a lot of experience with, first-hand experience with European modernism, particularly with German expressionism, which he was temperamentally drawn to, with its images of about people in cities and unsettled psychologies and urban motifs and so on. Now, one of the things that drew the two artists together was this idea of the figure, was the interest in the figure. Bates had always been interested in the figure, had been drawing the figure since he was a child with stunning results. And Snow, too, was interested in the figure, though in a slightly different way. But the two of them found each other in Calgary at a time when most painters were doing something with landscape. Not all, but most. Usually it was outdoor scenes, something recognizably Albertan, that was the main area of interest. And to be interested in the figure right away set you apart from most of the mainstream. So that was a very strong bond between the two. Here in the show there are many more Bates figures than there are Snow, which does indicate that he had already quite a bit of experience making this motif. This particular lithograph, called Showgirls, does in some ways resemble the original Snow three figures, or four figures that we started to talk about over on that side. But as always with Bates, it's the line. Very, very sensitive, very descriptive, very expressive line. And that's the kind of thing, in my opinion, the more you look, the more you see. His figures are never realistic. There are distortions always, as there are with the figures in German expressionism. But the distortions are all made with a view to expressing something essential about the figure. They're not made to distract from the figure and draw attention to the artist, but they're made with the idea that changing the relationships in a figure often reveals a truth about it, whether that truth is physical, structural truth or psychological truth. But that's the kind of thing I think you can see there. You can come a little bit closer. I feel like I'm talking. So here we've got this nice hot pink, this carnival canopy here, and these three very attractive and nubile ladies who I would suggest are meant to be prostitutes. And this does, to me, look very much like a bordello background with the color and the shapes and so on. That's a common motif in modernism. It's not something that Max Bates was particularly preoccupied with, but it does indicate that he had been looking at some other kinds of traditions. Then you get this flat space, but still very anatomical, very acutely observed elements. If you look at the legs of this lady, she's got that combination of curve and fat and muscle and softness and bone hardness, and that sort of coy stance that really is a symbol of her role as an object. Look at me, what do you think? You know, would it be me or would it be her? Maybe her. And she isn't really all that happy about the situation. I think there's a sort of bored, cynical, hard look in her face, which is accomplished by just little, tiny, minimal means. Then remembering again that this is a lithograph, there's a great deal of drawing in this lithograph. Colors go on top of each other, certainly. Texture, strong, netting-like texture. texture there. I'm not sure if that's actually a netting or whether that was an imitation of the texture of a netting, but let's not drive ourselves around the bend speculating about that. But it does very much look like a bright, bright drawing, as much as it does on the lithograph. So, might as well just keep going down this direction. I find this a very interesting image. This is called Children. Maxwell Bates. He did several images, I think, that are related. This is one of them. There's another one in the collection at the Glenbow Museum. Here you see these remarkable figures who really have very little articulation in the head area at all. This is blank. The texture and the lines and this very frenetic, kinetic sort of patterning is pervasive, but it doesn't impinge on the faces of the figures. And this contrast between this flat, ghostly face and this abstracted, unsettled, kinetic surrounding produces a bit of a dissonance. This is a typical Bates face here. Tiny chap who looks to be up to no good whatsoever. He's a little 9-year-old Stasi in training or what, we don't know, but he's got this militaristic looking uniform on. He confronts us absolutely directly. Why, we don't know, and he is not particularly benign. Why? That's the whole unsettling quality of this. There's never an explanation. There's just the presence of this inexplicable sort of expression. But it's a very abstract image. Here two forms that echo each other. This one happens to be a hat. If you just look at the gray here, not the black, not the red, not the pink. Just look at the gray parts. You can see that they're made in a way as to balance the picture and to draw the eye from this little chap's socks all the way up and across and down again in a very sort of rational way. Big chunky, big peasant feet, big hands. Those are things that's a characteristic of Bates and Snow's figural art. That's something that they both found in German Expressionism, and that Snow found also in the art of Henry Moore, the sculpture of Henry Moore.
Elizabeth?
Yes, please.
Is this composition plan, is this
good question.
intellectually organized work?
I would say, and certainly it is, especially in the case of Bates, who did not tend to leave things up to chance. He had overwhelmingly vivid visual images in his mind. He had very strong ideas about what he wanted to do, always. And basically, he thought first and painted or printed later. Okay, so the thought, the plan is in place, and the image follows. Whereas John Snow, starting at about this time in the late 50s, as I briefly alluded to over there, was beginning to be interested in the whole idea of accidents. Not accident as in a large and inconvenient event, but an accident in terms of form and color becoming something independent of planning. He was interested, John Snow, was interested in automatism, which you may be familiar with as a philosophical idea. First came about in the context of writing. But the idea of automatism is that the creative forces in an artist are not necessarily all rational, mental, cognitive ones, but are sometimes intuitive and subconscious.